And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest is the one and only Dr. Ray Guarendi, author of another book, Fighting Mad, Practical Solutions for Conquering Anger, published by Servant Books. Always great to get you down here.
Everybody's a one and only.
That's right.
Is there any other Doug Kecks?
Well, don't get me mad. I just finished reading your book here. I'm trying to be positive now, and not my normal crabby
surly self.
Surly self. I was trying to be upbeat just for you, to kind of match your energy level, But you're doing the radio show, and you were on a while ago with Father Mitch, and you got the TV show going. You're like the Catholic Phil Donahue here. You got a million things happening at once.
It's very easy to do a lot of things if you don't worry about doing them well. Mm-hmm. Very easy. Much easier.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about, is that your take on this book? I didn't think so, because I actually read it and I thought it was pretty good, and I think you did offer practical solutions for conquering anger. And let me ask you about that right in the beginning, and you kind of report to yourself. In the acknowledgments, you talk about your Claudia Volkman, who's your editor, and then you said that Cindy Kavanaugh, a former editor, who asked you, did you ever think about writing a book about anger? And my first response was what you actually said after. Was that because she thought you had anger issues to be dealt with, or because she thought you had some expertise in it? Why did she suggest that?
I have no idea. You can't read these editors, man. They'll say something, well, you maybe you ought to write some stuff down about pathology. It's okay. I don't want to say this out of my bailiwick, because I'm a shrink. Mm-hmm. And most of the folks who come in are wrestling with some kind of stress, anxiety, agitation, eruption. What is the shrinky sounding phrase now? He has anger management issues.
Let me ask you about that, because you say they come in. Do you think there are more people coming in today than there used to be? And if so, is it because we live in a more high stress society where information is bombarding us and the expectations are so high of what people are supposed to do? Is it that people have been convinced they're supposed to be perfectly happy and fine all the time, and if they're not, so something must be wrong? All of the above? What is it?
I don't want to come across this strong, but we're an angry people. Mm-hmm. And anger is the difference between the way I want it to be and the way it is. In our culture, we are bombarded. Well, you should have this, you should have that, you should be this, you should feel that, you should think this, you should walk this way. I don't. If you look at the surveys, Doug, the U.S. is not one of the happier countries in the world. Mm-hmm. We are far behind third world countries in sense of satisfaction.
Well, that's because in many cases those people don't know what they're missing.
That's it. We are told every day what we're missing, and therefore much of what anger is not the explosive type. It's the percolating, brewing, stewing kind of low
simmering.
Simmering.
That's
what
you talk about.
That's a good word. Did you make it up?
No, I actually read it in your book here. I don't know where you got it.
You didn't magic marker very much. I've seen you magic marker some of these other authors, and
well, I just magic marker new things I hadn't read before. But you talk about in here, because you make a lot of sense. There's a lot of things in here. You talk about the idea of the way we talk about things. You alluded to before. We used to have a short fuse, emotional. Somebody had a temper. Now they have some long name associated with what it happens to be. Like you said, anger management. And it's
emotional dysregulation.
Right. And you say the new language avoids value judgments, because that's the question people say, well, why is it that way? Isn't wrong, it's unacceptable, all these things like that. And so it conveys the impression that one understands what's really going on below the surface. So if you sound like you're educated, it sounds like you really understand what's going on, which may not be the case. And also the fact is, and I thought that was the most important one, especially from a Catholic perspective, is the whole idea of value judgments. That no one's behavior is to be judged, it's just to be noticed or excused away or write a prescription, or somehow if it's really an underlying cause, then you're not responsible.
In 50 years, the shrinks have succeeded markedly in altering the way we look at morality and self-responsibility. And the idea that I'm afflicted with some kind of emotional disruption, almost as though it's from outside of me, that kind of dragoons my behavior and makes me act that way toward you. I have anger management issues, not I am an angry guy.
Right. This almost dualistic idea.
Yes.
And a way is to separate yourself from responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's either your fault that you're making me angry, or if I have these other anger management problems, it's because of the way I was treated as a youth, or I can't help it because that's how I was born.
We don't own it. We don't own it. We own it less and less. But that's the irony, though. Any kind of intervention has to assume you own it, because if you don't own it, I can't do anything about it.
Unless you're willing to acknowledge you have something that needs to be dealt with, you're never going to deal with it.
That's right.
But in our society, excuse making has hit a new level of.
Give me an idea for a new book. I'm going to steal it, but I'll put Ray Guarendi with Doug Keck on the cover.
That sounds good.
Book.
It's interesting you say deficits in impulse regulatory mechanisms carries more biological oomph than saying somebody's got a short fuse.
It does. Well, think about it. You know, I'm a victim of my wiring.
Right.
You know, some people. Now, granted, some people are more feisty by nature than others.
Right.
You know, you see the little old lady.
So when you say by nature, what do you mean by nature? By their genes, by
wiring,
how the family,
genetics, temperament, who the person is. And if somebody has 6 kids, they're going to say that one over there has got the temper.
And anybody who's got more than one child realizes that they're all different and they were born different.
They were
right?
born different, and that whole idea of my wiring made me do it is false. It can influence you.
Right.
And
it may have to give you a proclivity or
that's
something.
Right. I had an aunt. She was 93 years old. Died when she was 93. I don't think I ever saw this woman ever raise her voice.
And she's the one you talk about in the book,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Some guy broke into her house.
Right.
And she walks into the kitchen. She goes, "Hey, put that down, you dirty dog." That was the extent of her irritation. Now, are you going to say, well, the woman is just holy. She's got 3 times the amount of grace that you and I got. I think Aunt Esther was just wired like that. She never really dealt with that. On the other hand, I play sports. You elbow me in the face.
This is the softball
out.
stories in here?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you with something like that. If somebody heard about her responding that way, would they say that she's sublimating, she's just suppressing her normal anger, and that's not healthy?
They would. They would say it's not typical for someone to be that calm. She's swallowing it. And in the old days, they would say, she's going to get an ulcer. That's what they would say. It's over-psychologized. I would just simply say, nah, she just never has to deal much with that surge. It's not part of her.
Right. She doesn't have that innate initial reaction that actually happens in many cases to some degree for some people where it's not even in their control to have that initial.
And that is true. And I'm not going to make moral excuses for them.
Right.
But I am going to say there are those folks out there who basically their first reaction is trip switch.
Right. But isn't that in some ways a way of looking at it as part of our cross? Like St. Paul had an affliction that he wanted taken away, he had to deal with it. And in some ways for all of us, we're born with certain situations, our makeup, who our parents happen to be, or situations we grew up with, where it makes it more understandable you might act that way, but it doesn't excuse you for acting that way, because you're supposed to, you should realize that, or the old Catholic expression, avoid the areas of temptation, the occasions of sin. If you know this is something that you have a problem with, then you're supposed to avoid that and stay away from dealing with that.
I pulled myself out of a lot of basketball games because I felt it coming on. I knew that one more guy pushes me the wrong way and I'm going to do something. And these guys are my friends.
Right.
So I went and sat out, which my teammates were happy about because I stink.
It says, I'm not the one who's acting wrongly. It's my affliction that's moving me. This is also interesting. The reasoning travels in circles. Why is he so easily upset? Because he has anger management issues. How do you know he has anger management issues? Because he's so easily upset. Because you can't, and you talk about it, it's not like you do a blood test to figure out these things, like if you have diabetes or something else. But yet that you talk about the numbers, that we deal with numbers. What do you mean?
Well, in any kind of medical situation, we want a number. I want my cholesterol number. I want my ejection fraction. I want my blood sugar level. I want a number. Tell me where that number falls. How do I put a number on anger? What do? I take a poll of 100 people? And do they say, well, you know, Ray's reaction in that situation was the top 34%? You can't do that. So by its very nature, it's vague.
Right.
And once it's vague, well, I tell you what, if it's vague, I got a lot of room for excuses.
And does it also, I think sometimes wondering with what we're dealing with today, if you have a situation, a parent is trying to deal with it, let's say with a child or something, they are concerned, but maybe both parents are working, and so they don't really have time to run up to school every time so-and-so gets in trouble or there's a problem. And the doctor knows that, but if he tells them, well, the problem is that, yeah, he's a little hyperactive, he's being a boy, but, he might be acting out also because he's not getting enough attention or something. I don't know. That's not going to go over so well, but saying, yes, he's got ADD or something else.
And it's not you.
Right. And everybody's happy because the doctor has figured it out. The mothers and the parents aren't to blame, and the kid's not to blame either, right? So everybody's okay.
And it's not you.
In problem or disorder, and I like the way you laid this out, and with that idea, with all the categories you have, anger or issues, problem or disorder, cool or hot. That was the question I was going to ask. Is that your aunt?
That was my aunt.
I was going to ask you, was she cool or hot?
She was cool. She was totally
She was
cool.
definitely cool. But I mean, with that idea of, is that the way to think about these things? Is that we think about them as an either or situation? Why do we want to think of it that way?
Human beings want categories. I got to be able to summarize a whole bunch of information, simple. He's an honest guy.
Right.
What the heck does that mean?
That trait thing you talk about.
What does that mean?
Right.
But we talk that way. We have to talk that way. I can't say, well, he doesn't cheat on his golf score, but he's not real honest with the IRS. Now, regarding feelings, he's not honest with his wife in those feelings, but he's much more honest with his oldest daughter. We can't talk like that.
Right.
He's an honest guy.
We don't have time for that.
He's an outgoing fella.
So we need to have a broad.
We need a
label.
A label.
Which is what we hear about.
We gravitate towards that stuff.
Right. And this was another one. In that area of dealing with, what's going on with the wife wonders her husband's tied up in the internet addiction, or the child has the Defiant syndrome. And the question comes, is it normal? Okay? And you say, ironically, some of the most well-known of conditions are not even professionally recognized diagnoses. Think of middle child syndrome or midlife crisis. And that's the issue today. It seems like there is no normal. Is there? And if you say somebody's normal, then you're somehow intolerant or biased.
There's a certain irony going on here, Doug. On one hand, we say, hey, we need to be tolerant and accept the wide range. On the other hand, our tolerance for normal is doing this.
I see.
He's not active. He's hyperactive. He doesn't have a learning problem. He has a learning disorder. So what we're doing is we're taking the range of normal. My kid's shy. Is she too shy? Well, he's really got a competitive streak in him, doesn't he? Do you think that's normal? We're just squeezing it down. At the same time, we're espousing all this tolerance.
Right. You said a key word here is judge. The borders of many diagnoses are not clear-cut. They require interpretations. This is what I thought was interesting. Consider oppositional defiant disorder. You hear that, but
Most common disorder for kids right now.
So,
tagged.
But it's odd. That's the name. That's
Yes,
the
it is.
acronym.
That's right.
So
It's
you're
odd.
saying those kids are odd.
You're saying that, in my opinion, as a professional, that kid's behavior is too much, too intense, and too often. Therefore, he's got a disorder.
Right. Severe discrete episodes of failure to resist aggressive impulses.
That's
like
one
you
of the
say.
symptoms in the manual.
And like you say, what defines severe?
What's discrete? What's aggressive impulse? If I want to, you say something here, and I want to tip this table over, but I don't. I just yell at you. Well, did I control my impulse? Okay, yelling at you, somebody could say, he gave into his impulse. No, because my original impulse was to tip this table over.
Right.
I controlled that one.
Right.
It's really hard to pinpoint, and that's where the frustration comes in.
Well, you say, I always thought adolescent and emotional were pretty much synonymous.
I got 5 girls.
You say here, mountains of research, and this goes back to your aunt and the power of temperament. Mountains of research now confirm that what we non-researchers have known intuitively. All people are born with biological predispositions that move in one direction or another in their context with others in their life. But, and go on to say, no single gene underlies temper or impulsiveness or irritability. No. It's an intricate dance among many genes and circumstances. There's a universal characteristic called free will that makes the picture even more unpredictable. But does most people today believe in free will in the academy?
It's narrowing the idea that I have control. I can choose. Well, you can, depending upon how you were raised, depending upon what your genetic makeup is, depending upon the immediate circumstances you find yourself in. So if we get rid of those, you got about this much. You got about this much Ray Guarendi left. Okay, operate in here.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas traditionally religious people would say, hey, despite all that, you've got about this much of Ray Guarendi left.
Right. And so you still, even though you have these situations, you still have the ability to make these choices.
If you don't, you might as well shut it down, Doug, because we're animals and we can't be held accountable for anything.
Right, right. Well, that's what we are. Simmer or boil in this, and you mentioned we talked about simmering, but you also talked about simmering anger has a cousin called silent anger. What's silent anger?
You get people who will say, I never saw that in him before. You know, the television cameras come and they interview the neighbors. He was such a quiet man. You know, he knitted shawls for the ladies in the nursing home. You never would think he'd torch 5 houses.
Right, exactly.
You know, that's the kind of stuff that makes for great TV. But for the most part, when we're angry people, it's obvious.
Right.
You don't get somebody who's lived 12 years, quiet, calm, never showing any sign of any, like my Aunt Esther, and then coming home. That's rare. That's rare. But people are fascinated by that.
Right.
They're fascinated by it.
Well, you saw, I thought this was an interesting analogy. The most inexperienced cook knows that bringing a simmering pot to boil takes less than starting with one filled with cool water, of course. And so in a lot of ways, you talk about the idea, the explanation is straightforward. You stumbled into a sensitive personal place. You stepped on a nerve, one you didn't know that was there. Even the rawest nerves, however, aren't typical signs of emotional percolating personalities. I know one of the things you were talking about here is like, Steve just told me his mother-in-law is getting easier to get along with. That's what the husband says. The wife thinks my mother isn't that witch you think she is. So it's a lot of that. And also just the idea, you know, and I think you talk about it later on in the book as well, is the idea that when you hit somebody like that and they explode, it's many times it's because there's something about what you're saying that's true.
That's
and
right.
You've hit that nerve.
Right now.
And that's the thing they don't want people to see in them. And the fact that you stumbled upon it is very distressing to them.
Do you ever hear the phrase, you want to make me mad, tell a lie about me? You want to make me really mad, tell the truth about me.
Right.
So a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I don't understand why she reacted that way. I didn't mean anything by that. I'll say, I wonder what she heard you say about her. And what you stepped on, where she erupted. You know, mothers will come to me, they got a kid that's 24 years old. My daughter hasn't talked to me for 6 months. Why? I don't know. Last time we were on the phone, I just said something about her daughter and the way she was acting. I said, I'll bet she heard you criticizing her motherhood. And she just about had enough of that in her mind, so she just wrote you off for the meantime.
Right. Even though in your mind, when you're doing, you think
I'm
you're
just
doing
simply
it for the
saying
right.
the kid's doing this, hey, this will help you out.
Stop being her mother.
That's right.
Right. In Close or Clash, chapter 6, you say it's the law of emotional proximity. Those closest to us rile us up the most.
Sad, isn't it? In marriage counseling, I'll say to a person, who are you nicest to? Oh, he's wonderful with everybody at work. They love him. They think he's the greatest guy. He comes home and he barely grunts at me, or if he grunts, he scolds me. I don't know. You ever hear of the law of entropy? It's a physical law.
Right.
Governs the universe. Everything decays.
Yeah. Thermodynamics.
I think it's
Third
number
law.
one. Thermodynamic law number 1. You had some science in college, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been reading your books.
Okay. I think the law of entropy applies to social relationships. The people we're closest to, we get sloppy with. We get lazy, we stop using manners,
We take 'em
stop
for granted.
saying I'm sorry, we just get sloppy.
We take them for granted.
And that's exactly what happens.
Because I'm married, you have to put up with me because
That's
we're
right.
married and we're just going to stay together.
I can be irritable
Right.
with you. What are you going to do about it?
Right. Is there a downside to me as far as work or some other job, or if I want to be your friend, if I give you a hard time, you may not be my friend anymore.
There, you put your finger on, Doug. There's a selfishness to that, which is I want the ladies at work to think I'm a sweetheart. I wouldn't want to do something that they would think less of me. You, on the other hand, you're my wife. Well, I already know you think less of me. Or we've had our ups and our downs, and I really don't care all that much what you think of me. But that lady over there, I don't want her to think bad of me.
Right. And you talk about the law of contact, the law of personalization, the law of expectations, which you mentioned before, and the fourth law, the law of reciprocity. If I treat someone well, I believe she should treat me well. If I respect my mother, she should reciprocate. When she doesn't, the double standard irks me. I feel cheated.
Yeah, because we have higher expectations. There's an irony in this, Doug. If you're my brother, well, I have a higher expectation for you to treat me right. You should, you're my brother, okay? But on the other hand, I have a lower expectation for me to treat you right.
Because
I
you're
can
my
slap you with that. I'm your brother, yeah.
Because you're my brother.
That's right, so come this way.
Right.
It's like the preeminent Christian virtue is nice. I want you to be nice. Why? Because that ministers to me. You've got to be nice.
Well, chapter 15, you hit on one we hear about all the time today. Fair or life? Within a few short years after his fumbling attempts to talk, a child will fling his first F word. No, he's not. You're not talking about the bad F word. You're talking about the word we hear all the time, fair. Parents are not without a ready defense. Life's not fair. We hear about that even in politics today. So often the major thing is, but is that fair? And I remember years ago in dealing with something that had to do with employees and things, and this person told me, it has nothing to do with right or wrong. It has to do with the perception of fairness. That's when people get upset, when they believe something is unfair to them personally, especially.
C.S. Lewis uses this argument for Christianity because he says there's something within us, for example, that demands justice. And this is something that can't be taught out depending upon the culture, depending upon your age. You want that. You can't treat me that way. That's not right. That's not fair. Okay? So we have this sense of justice. And when that is bruised, I react. Okay, what you're doing here is not right. It's not fair. It's not just. And so my emotions, why? Because my thoughts. We're going to get to this, but people think anger is an emotion. It's really not. It's a thought. It's how you perceive things. And if I perceive that you're not being just to me, kind of thing. Or if I have self-control, I just... The spouse who just erupts on an in-law, on some slight provocation. Why? Well, because for the last 3 years, she's not been fair to me.
Right, and one of the things I noticed too is you kind of talk about and I think about this from marriage encounters, because this was a staple of marriage encounter. Feelings are neither right
I hate that.
nor wrong.
I hate that.
They just are, and it's what you do with them that matters.
I hate that. Okay, hey, I go up to my wife.
Okay.
Honey, I want you to know I have lust for other women. But, hey, it's just a feeling. Don't worry about it. It's neither right nor wrong. Now, if I ever act upon it, then you can hold me accountable. But I want you to know I look at those women and with a lot of lust. And then she says to me, well, Ray, I want you to know I have an unbelievable amount of resentment towards you. But I'm just trying to be authentic, okay? No, some feelings are bad. They just are bad. That's standard psychological stuff. Some feelings are bad. But here's the other problem, Doug. When you have a strong emotion that 82% of the time will lead to a bad piece of behavior, okay? Then you could say that emotion's dangerous. Okay, you might not call it right nor wrong. It's dangerous. If I have that emotion, if I'm jealous of you, and because of that, you say something, I fire off at you. That jealousy is something I got to take care of. It's neither right nor wrong. It's wrong. Get it out of here.
Well, I think in a chapter you talk about later here, later on in the book, chapter 21, personal or otherwise, you talk about a couple of things that you can do, like look outside yourself. And also this is where step 2, critique the criticism. Much criticism comes not because you're acting wrongly or hurtfully. It comes because you're acting in a way the criticizer disagrees with.
That's very common. When people will say, my mother-in-law is critical. I go, you do anything morally wrong? Well, no, I don't think so. Well, what's she critical of? My parenting. Okay, that's her opinion. She's given her opinion, but there's no basis to it. That's her opinion. She doesn't like the way you're doing it.
Right.
Okay, so if we recognize that the critique, the commentary, is not based on anything we need to look at ourselves and say, I'm morally wrong and I better look at this, then you can pretty much, I don't want to say blow it off, but you can blow it off. Right. Everybody has opinions. They might say, well, Doug, he does that bookmark thing. He has to have that book in front of him. You know, what kind of interviewer is that he has to go through this book?
Right, he marks it up and
He
ruins it
marks
for
it up.
everybody
Yeah, I
else.
can't sell it now.
No, exactly.
Man, you owe me $14.
Okay.
Okay, bill at the EWTN.
That's all right. I'm used to overpriced products.
I'm done. This interview's over. That's it. You stepped on a nerve.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm speaking the truth, and it hit you. One of the things I wanted to ask just before we go, March 3rd, 1983 is a very important date. What is it?
Well, I'll tell you what. I play a lot of softball, and my teammates have said Ray was very good softball player in his day. March 3rd,
That was the day.
1983.
And
That was my 4 for 4.
That was your day.
That was my day.
And it's all over from
I've been
there.
living a
Okay?
glory day.
Days from that.
Not even days, glory day.
You got a picture of that, and that's it. Well, thank you so much,
Doug,
Dr. Ray.
always a
great
pleasure.
to have
Thank you.
Have you here on Bookmark, especially Dr. Ray Guarendi, Fighting Mad, Practical Solutions for Conquering Anger. And it's published by Servant, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Always a great read. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.